Relationships. It is something that we deal with all the time here at our practice. Let me ask you a question. How many of you, when you think about the partner you want to be with or the person you are currently with, what are the things that you desire or expect of him or her? I want you to think about that for a second. You've probably heard on our social media about what healthy or toxic expectations are, right? Maybe you've had an experience where you feel like an expectation was either really good or was really unhealthy or really triggering to you. And I know that as I work with a lot of people, a lot of couples, and the question is like, what are some of the healthy expectations or behaviors I should look for when I'm looking for the love of my life, when I'm looking for my partner, even when I'm trying to decide who is my friend, right? So I want to tackle a little bit of that today to give you some tools and some what I call mental health nuggets to help you make the best choices for you when it comes to relationships. I'd like to start out by asking, if I were to ask anybody, do you have expectations in general? And anybody didn't raise their hands, I would be like, you're lying. Because everybody has expectations. For example, around this time, it's around 6:32 here in the state of Michigan. If you have not had dinner yet, your stomach is gonna start doing a baseline, making noise, and in your mind it's gonna be like, well, it's time for me to eat. So if it's time for me to eat, I am expecting to get some food. So that's an expectation. We have every day a lot of things that we expect or just automatically think they're going to happen because we either got used to it, is what we've been taught, is what is normal in the society or environment we're at. That expectations that we have just in regular life, like I expect to sleep in a comfy bed tonight because I'm going to sleep in my bed. I expect my heater will work because it's cold outside, right? Well, we have expectations every day. And what happens when they're met? When expectations are met, we feel peace, we feel satisfied. So if I'm hungry and it's like, well, it's 6:32, I gotta get some food, and I go eat, that means that my expectation was met. So what's gonna happen? I'm gonna feel satisfied, I'm gonna be good. But what happens to an expectation when it's not met? And I want to talk about this because it's gonna be the basis of everything we talk about today. When we don't have an expectation met, we have an emotional reaction to it. Let me explain to you. If it's 6:32, I'm like, all right, I'm hungry. Let's eat. And there's no food. And I got no car. And I can't DoorDash. It's 7:30 hits, 8:30 hits, 9:30 hits. And there's no food around. What do you think is most likely going to happen? If you read my mind, you probably thought, man, hangry, he's gonna get cranky. It's gonna be, yeah, because what happens is I was expecting to eat, and my body's having a reaction to like I did not get food. So we get hangry and we get irritable, like, I get out of my way, I can't stand you, I can't look at you right now. Because an expectation to eat was not met. Imagine how we get hangry and start acting a little bit nuts. I know I have. I'm the first one to admit it. If I don't get to eat at the right time, and I have to work on that. I'm continuing to work on that because my expectation was not met. Now, where does that emotional reaction come from? It comes from what we call core beliefs. Core beliefs are the beliefs we have about our world, how the world functions, how we see ourselves and others based on our experiences, our upbringing, our education, our culture, all these different factors that make up who you are, right? So I'm saying that because when we talk about expectations, when we go into a romantic relationship, when we date somebody, when we build a friendship, whether we admit it or not, we have some expectations. Expectations are not bad. Okay, it's about whether you have healthy or unhealthy expectations. Even often self expectations are not bad. They help us function in the world. Well, if I expect to eat by 6:30, I got to make sure there's food in my fridge, right? So it helps me to plan to make sure that my expectation is met. Just in relationships, to have expectations, right? If you came from a more traditional background, and I'm from Dominican Republic. I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and it was a little bit more traditional back then. Um, it's one of those things that I would say, my perspective, my expectation of who I'm with is going to be different because it's based on a time period where, as the man, I was expected to be the one who worked more, and the female was expected to be more at home with the kids. I'm not saying that I believe that's the only way to do it, but that was what I was used to, right? So I may walk into an expectation, and I may meet someone who didn't come from that background, right? And we're clashing all of a sudden. Well, I expect you to cook me, make me a sandwich. Well, I'm a strong, independent woman. I don't need to make nobody no sandwich. And then we start with these different arguments, right? Because we have these expectations. And what happens a lot of times, and I see this all the time in my counseling room, we have this really weird assumption. I have this expectation. Therefore, because I think this way, it should be clear to everybody else that this is the way it should be. Here's an example. I had a friend admit to me that until the last few years, she really believed and expected that if she was mad at her partner and they asked her, "Are you okay?" and she said no, she assumed and expected him for him to know that she was not okay and that he needed to ask a few more times. She expected that of him. But what ended up happening, the guy never did it because in his mind, it's like, "Oh, you tell me you're fine. I'm going to believe you. You're fine." Because probably his expectation, he was like, "Well, if you tell me that's how you feel, I'm going to believe you." So see how either expectation in of itself is not bad, but it wasn't communicated. It wasn't discussed. Parts of those are probably not realistic or healthy, right? Um, I want to talk a little bit about how do we start making some healthy expectations when it comes to a romantic relationship in specific. And I want to talk about four behaviors that we have to make sure that we should expect of our partners, right? These are just regular basic things. One, we should expect safety. What I mean by safety is this person not going to harm me physically? Is this person not going to intentionally, being the key word, intentionally hurt me emotionally? Uh, will he not hurt me verbally? Right? We don't want to get to the point of abuse, right? There needs to be a safety where, yeah, we may have differences. Yeah, we may say out of pocket stuff at times, but we can agree that we're different people, and since we're different people, we have to learn how do we deal with each other. Let me take that back. I think that might have been a little bit more confusing. So, if when it comes to expectations, one of the things that is important for you to know is that is the expectations need to be, first of all, clear, and they need to be communicated. And here's why I say this. Going back to the example of my friend, she had an expectation that her boyfriends or her partners would assume that if she said she was okay, that they were supposed to ask a few times. Because these expectations were not addressed, they weren't communicated, there were some assumptions that were not necessarily accurate, it led to clashing. What ended up that relationship? It didn't work out. There ended up being resentment, and ended up being conflict that was never solved because expectations were not clear and agreed upon. One of the things I want to encourage you is when you walk into a relationship, don't assume that all your expectations are going to be the other person's expectations. It's important that as you get to know the person, to have a conversation like, "Hey, here's what I think this relationship should look like. Here are the things that are important to me." There also should be room to be like, "Here's the things I'm willing to negotiate." For example, "Hey, I, me and my wife, We expect respect. We expect no abuse. We expect to have accountability, right? Those are things that we're like, these are non-negotiable for us, right? We expect that no, that we won't harm our kids. Those are non-negotiables. You know, we have a certain way we like to operate in our house that we've sat down and agreed. And there's some things where we have accommodated and say, you know what, I'm okay with being flexible in this area. For example, I come from a more traditional background. My wife, less so. So when it comes to house chores, her expectation was probably more like co-op. That's what she saw her parents do. They were more cooperative. Even though my parents are very loving, I did see more of my mom do more of the house stuff. Um, it was probably more normalized where I came from. It was, something that she just did. So I realized that I kind of expected that, and she expected the other one, and we had to sit down and be like, you know what? I expect that because that's what I know, but I'm more flexible to be a co-op. But I did put here's the things that are important to me. So there's certain things, there's certain areas of our responsibilities in house that I've been like, this is important to me. I want to take charge of these. The other ones we're flexible. We involve our kids. We decided that's important for our kids to contribute to our house. But that came because we had to talk about our expectations. If we had not talked about them, I would have been frustrated at her for not being a traditional housewife. She would have frustrated at me for not being cooperative in the house chore roles and all of that, because we came from different expectations, right? And within that, there's a few expectations I think that are basic for you guys to know. According to one of the things that we do at Outreach Counseling, because one of our main goals of existence is to help diverse families heal and thrive. So we work with the Gottman Institute, and we're training under them because they are like the platinum standard of couples therapy. And they have a good article in their website in Gottman.com about truth about expectation relationships. It talks about the good enough relationship. And one of the things that we're seeing a lot in our counseling rooms is people are expecting the complete package in a partner. I want my man to pay for everything, to take care of me, to take care of my kids, to to not have me do anything. Like we all, and then you see it from women might have, certain women might have certain standards, certain men might have certain standards, and we expect everybody to come just like packaged. And they talk about the good enough, and what the good enough is to strive for a good enough relationship, which it sounds like settling, but it's not. And I want to be clear: we're not saying settle. We're saying good enough has to do with um, being able to know what are the key important things you need in a relationship that are the non-negotiables that are what I call the character things. Because things like wealth, you can build that. Vacations and all the Instagram stuff, you can build that. Okay. That doesn't mean that you're going to have a great relationship. Being able to have the expectations, you can negotiate this. The good enough is like, what is there kindness? Expectations to be treated with kindness, with love, with affection, respect. Their expectation to be loyal. Unless you're in an agreed polyamorous or multifaceted type of relationship, but there's an agreement to that. But in general, most relationships, there's an expectation of you got to be faithful to me. Let's be loyal to each other, right? Um, those are the healthy expectations because if you have those things, are they kind? Are they affectionate? Do they respect me? Uh, do they not tolerate emotional or physical abuse? Yeah, that's important. Are they willing to dialogue with you? Right? That good enough relationship is like we look at those things that are the essentials to build a good relationship. Because from there you can build healthier expectations. Because what happens is you say these are important, and then you don't expect your relationship to not have conflict. There's so many people I've seen in our counseling sessions that have this expectation that if there's conflict in their relationship, then that means that someone is screwing up. And that's not necessarily true. Conflict is a normal part of relationship. You learn masters of relationship, people who are really good at that, learn how to handle conflict well. They become masters at handling conflict because life is complicated. There's going to be conflict. There's going to be different opinions. You're going to wake up on the wrong side of the bed one day. You might say something out of pocket. You're human. Your partner is human, right? So expecting no conflict is a bad expectation. Expecting someone to take care of all your basic needs and you not contribute and create something is crazy. For you to expect for the person to have everything together and you not contribute, it's also crazy. Because again, do they have the essentials for you to create a life with them? And a life, I'm not talking about economics. You can build that. Uh, Vacations and fantasy lives, you can build that. That that can be done. Being able to learn and go to school, you can build that. But do they have the character? So that good enough relationship, if you want to look it up in Gottman Institute, in their blogs, they have one. It is written, if I remember correctly. Um, Look at the author real quick. It's actually by Dr. John Gottman himself, who is the main researcher for the Gottman Institute. And it talks about you can have, it's about having realistic standards because other things you can build. You want to have that house in the lake? Great. Make sure you have someone who you can do that with that will be willing to work with you, that is kind, that is loyal, that can also be brave enough to tell you how they feel when it's uncomfortable. And that's not permission for you to mistreat your partner, but for you to say like, "Hey, I didn't like how that came out. Let's figure out how to fix it." That is the good enough aspect. And it's not about settling. It's about having an expectation of like what are the things about their character that is important. Because that other stuff that people care about on Instagram and TikTok, first of all, that fades away. Many people have that and still get divorced. But it's about having an expectation that is healthy. The essentials have to do with who are they as a person. And who are they has a lot more to do with how they react to conflict, what are their values, right? Be able to say, hey, for example, if I come from a certain faith and that's incredibly important to me, it's okay for me to put an expectation of like, hey, I would expect that whoever I'm partnered with would really share my faith as passionately as me. Doesn't mean you hate people from other faiths. It means that you want that as part of your relationship. You communicate that. So that's going to have to be maybe an essential part of what you look for. I might have to find someone who's of the same faith as me. Again, not that you're discriminating other people's that because that's an important part for you. You can build that to a healthy expectation and build the other stuff, the fun parts, the Instagrammable parts of the relationship. Those can be built. But having some expectations, because what happens is if we have unrealistic expectations, we have higher stress because what happens? Our When our expectations are not met, we react emotionally. We have an emotional reaction. Most emotional reaction comes with big emotions and conflict, usually gridlock conflict. So let's say I expected my husband to uh, never disagree with me, right? And they disagree with me once, and I have a fit. I throw a tantrum. I can't believe you disagree with me. What's wrong with you? I thought you loved me. Because our expectation wasn't met. When we feel triggered by an unmet expectation, I want to encourage people to, instead of assuming that person is bad, to be like, what is making me feel that way? What are the beliefs that are being challenged for me? In the case of someone like I didn't expect my husband to challenge me, the belief is I as this partner in this situation should not be challenged. And we need to figure out, is that really a healthy expectation or core belief to have an expectation with? Because what's going to happen is if we continue to work under expectations that are not clear, they're not communicated, they're not healthy, they're not realistic, it's going to continue to bring conflict because you're starting to, one of my favorite TikTokers is this guy who talks about, the Lulu, Jesus Christ on the motorbike, and he always makes comments about other people's TikToks. And he always says like, people are the Lulu. Well, to have these expectations uncommunicated and for you to have and not put healthy stuff and work on that good enough, that character piece is the Lulu. I expect my man to pay all my bills. Is that really what's most important to you? Because money comes and go. The best wealth is built with a good partner and a good family system, right? I'm not saying that people can't be self-made. That happens. But is money really the most important thing? Because that can come and go. Or would you rather have someone that would be a problem solver, someone who listens, someone who's willing to challenge you in a loving way? That's a gift to be able. My wife is good at that. She can challenge me in a loving way. I could be like, man, I don't like it, but she might have a point because I know she's not trying to hurt me. She's trying to love on me and tell me the truth. And how many times do we say we love somebody and we lie straight to their face? That seems unloyal to me. That's my opinion. Take that very lightly. But having very clear and healthy expectations is something that I really encourage for you to have in the beginning of the relationship. And start with like, let's get to know who we are. Here are I would start with values. Here are the things that are very important to me. Here are the values that I want to be able to incorporate in my life and in my future and in my family. What do you think of those? Don't just say, were you okay with those? Because yes and no answers. Ask open-ended questions. What are your thoughts? For example, of like, hey, I'm a real devout Christian. What are your legit thoughts about the faith? It's a conversation you gotta have. What are the expectations? Here's what I expect. What do you expect? Which ones match? And which ones don't match so we can negotiate? Because there needs to be a room to negotiate. If you don't do that exercise and you continue to live with unmet expectations or unhealthy expectations, you're going to continue to have these emotional outbursts and reactions that reduces stress, that creates dissatisfaction, that increases stress, depression, low self-worth, all of that. And it doesn't help your relationship because you're struggling. So I want to encourage you to take some time to write down, what do I really expect? What's the most important thing that I want in a partner in a relationship? If you're thinking about friendship, think about, what do I really want from friends? What is important for me? I'll tell you one of mine. You can use it. Anybody who claims to want to be my friend, I, I'm upfront. Hey, just know that if at some point, because this is normal, we might have a conflict, and that doesn't mean that we're not friends. I just want you to know that I'm going to come at that conflict with the best intentions, and that's what I expect of you. We're going to come with the idea that we can solve it, and if we can do that, man, we're gonna go real deep in our friendship. And my friends, every friend I've had, we've had some kind of difference or conflict, but we've learned to handle it. It was like, hey, it's okay we have conflict, but we can handle it in a loving and respectful way. We can have disagreements. We can have areas where we agree to disagree. All that to say is that having that expectation cleared up with my friendships avoided a lot of drama. Because they know that for me, conflict doesn't mean that we're not friends. It means that we got to solve it. I'm going to give it my best. Clear expectations. Same thing in your romantic relationships. So you can have lower stress. So you don't feel like you're continuing to be disappointed and feel like unmotivated and struggle with either anxiety or depression or low self worth. Because it's okay for you to say, this is the things that are important to me in a relationship. These are the things I would like to see. That's what your expectations are. And make sure they're healthy, they're clear, and they're based on more values and character than on superficial stuff. Because all the Instagrammable stuff, like I say, you can build that. And at the end, people do that and still get divorced. People do that and still hate their guts. People do that and they hate their relationship. So that stuff, as cool as it is, it's not what keeps a relationship healthy. It's not what makes you feel good about yourself. It's being able to find healthy and communicate healthy expectations. Hope this is helpful to you. If you like our content, please hit like, subscribe, share. If there's areas we always welcome good feedback, hit us up. Thank you. And I hope you all have a great, great